Hello, friends. I'm talking today with Ethan Nkana. Ethan is a talent agent for doctors. Why do we need talent agent for doctors, you ask? Physicians spend a lot of time learning about the human body and how to cure or repair it. However, when it comes to negotiating for their own salaries, that is a class that is often missed in med school. This is where Ethan steps in. He has spent the last decade on the other side of the table analyzing and negotiating physician contracts and compensation on behalf of hospitals and health systems. Today, Ethan uses the same industry-leading compensation data and insights that hospitals have access to when negotiating with physicians. There are some important nuggets of negotiation wisdom that we can glean from this episode. Let's dive in. Securing a big salary should be as easy as asking for more, right? Turns out it's a little bit more than that. First, let me ask you, which of these apply to you? Reading org announcements with envy as other people get promoted? Working long hours with little to show for it? Getting more degrees hoping to be seen? Don't feel bad. I made the same mistake myself without even realizing it. And it's not your fault. In this podcast, I'm going to help you master the strategy and techniques on how to get promoted, how to double your paycheck, and how to secure more flexibility without adding more work or more degrees.
You are listening to Salary Negotiations Made Simple, the show that builds your confidence and inspires you to negotiate for the career you deserve. Do you want to double your salary, secure an ideal career, and increase your confidence to powerfully negotiate every career move? Then you are in exactly the right place.
Hi, Ethan. Welcome to the studio. How are you today?
I am fabulous. Thank you for having me, Dorothy.
Happy Friday. We're recording on a Friday and looks like it's sunshiny where you are at.
That is deceiving. It's a snowy Friday. You were asking before we hopped on the call what I've been up to. And I did education this morning for some residents, but I was mostly outside shoveling snow this morning. So.
Oh my gosh. I don't miss that.
That has been my Friday.
Ethan, would you mind starting us off with a little bit about you and how you help?
Yeah, absolutely. So by way of training, I'm a lawyer by background. Don't hold it against me. I have my MBA and I spent my entire career working in hospitals. About 5 years ago now, 2019, I was laid off from a six-figure corporate job and left me disillusioned about the safe route for my career. And so now what I do for the last 4+ years is I work as a talent agent for doctors. And what that means is, in very basic terms, is I negotiate contracts and find opportunities for medical doctors who practice medicine. And a very easy example or analogy to share to maybe bring home the idea is if you follow any professional sports, or movie actors, all of those people have agents who negotiate their contracts for them. Most money, best fit. That's what I do for doctors. So I help them negotiate the most money and the opportunities that are the best fit for my clients.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Let me ask you, from a lay person's perspective, doctors should know how to negotiate their contracts, right? So what is the problem that you see that they show up with when they come to you?
Yeah, I love that you set that up. We did not talk about this beforehand. So yeah. One of the things that I just talked to these residents about this morning is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Doctors are incredibly intelligent. My mom is a doctor. She's my inspiration for my business. I only work with doctors. I absolutely adore them. And doctors are terrible at contract negotiation. But just like you said, Dorothy, because doctors are so intelligent, we look up to them, we admire them, we expect them to be good at everything. And for doctors, that confidence can spill over into other areas. But as I mentioned to the trainees this morning, while they are in training, figuring out how to treat disease, treat ailments, I was in a class called negotiation 3 hours a week for 4 months. So if you think that we're on the same playing field when it comes to being able to negotiate a contract or understand a contract, we're just not. And the way I bring this home so doctors know I'm not picking on them, think about if I were to throw on a pair of scrubs and a stethoscope and run into my local hospital and see if I could start caring for patients, right? Like I'd be in jail in no time, right? And I get that caring for patients is way more technically difficult than reading a contract. But the idea is there are people and entire industries around negotiation, contracts, and understanding what your value is as an employee. And doctors get none of that. Zero, zero. All the training, as smart as they are, they get zero training. And so the Dunning-Kruger effect says that you're a really smart person, and then you perhaps conflate that intelligence in one area with intelligence in another. And I think that's what happens to doctors. And frankly, they're really bad at contract negotiation. And we all are. Without training and education,
Without
we
training.
all are. It's uncomfortable, right? So unfortunately, they're worse than they know. And when I was a hospital executive, I took advantage of that. I would have doctors leaving negotiations thinking, I got a good deal, knowing, hey, that doctor is just taking a bath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is absolutely what I find when I'm negotiating too. Even professional negotiators, when they're negotiating for themselves, even if they are great at negotiations, are leaving huge amounts of money on the table because we are terrible at even advocating for ourselves. We don't go big enough.
Exactly. And I think one thing that often doesn't get enough attention is that it's uncomfortable, right? I've never been in a negotiation for myself where it's been comfortable, right? It causes some anxiety and you feel like, who am I to ask for this? So I think the challenge that hopefully the listeners today will overcome is it's uncomfortable and it's worth it. There's this movie, it's a Matt Damon movie, something about a zoo, a family zoo or something. And he talks about this idea of 30 seconds of courage. And so with my doctors, we often practice that exercise. This is a really hard thing for you to say or write. And you just got to be courageous for these next few seconds, and then it's going to be over. And then all the anticipation is going to be done, right? But that initial courage, it's difficult.
Yeah. How much are doctors leaving on the table when they don't work with someone like yourself or an expert in negotiations or contract or who have contract expertise?
Yeah, doctors leave tremendous amount of money on the table. So just to talk about like salary gaps for like women doctors, if you're talking general practice, you could be in the $50,000, $60,000. If you're talking specialists like surgeons or doctors who specialize in a certain area of the body or disease, those women could be leaving $100,000 on the table. But to be sure, all doctors are leaving money on the table and all employees are. So if we can deviate for just a moment, like when I was an employee, and I know this might sound a little bit cynical for some of the people who are listening, but when I was an employee, my view is the company is paying me as little as possible in order to keep the highest margins. And my job is to get that back. When I was a W-2 employee, I was always thinking about how can I get to the next level of compensation, because I hate to break it to you if I'm the one doing it, but if you're waiting for your employer to offer you a salary raise, don't hold your breath.
Yeah. That is a huge mistake that we make, where we assume that because you're a talented, high achieving employee, that your employer is thinking in those terms. They're not thinking in terms of, I'm going to retain this employee. They're really thinking about the margin improvement or how to keep you at the lowest possible rate.
Exactly. And can I share a quick story about?
Yes, please.
So I think sometimes it's easy to talk about the philosophy and when you should negotiate, but I actually did this. So I moved to Colorado in 2013, and I worked for a large multi-state hospital system. My salary was $72,000. I got laid off in 2019. So that's 6 years. My salary when I left was $140,000. So that is a 100% increase. And the way that I did that is at regular increments throughout my time there. So that was what, 2000, that's 6 years, 2013 to 2019. At regular increments, I would come back to the employer and say, hey, I know that I'm ready to be at the next level in the organization from a leadership perspective. So I would like for you to consider promoting me to this opportunity. They would say, of course, nope, we think you're great exactly where you are. So I really appreciate that. But just so you know, I've been presented an offer from employer competitor B, and they've offered me this opportunity that you believe I'm not ready for. So I'd love to stay here, but if you can't close the gap between what employer B is offered and what I'm currently making here, then I need to move on. Now, you can't use that 20 times a year or anything like that, but that strategy, when I start, and that 72,000, my salary was actually 70,000. And then I said, hey, this is me coming out of law school, think I'm a master negotiator. Hey, do you think you can increase my offer a little bit more? Yeah, here you go. Here's 2,000. That's not even 1%. What a joke. What a joke. It is up to us as employees to advocate for ourselves and demand that you be paid what you're worth. But here's the catch. And I talked to a doctor an hour ago about this exact thing. If you are going to get the value that you believe you deserve, you must be willing to go to grow.
Mm-hmm.
If you are only going to stay with your current employer and you expect them to pay you what you're worth, again, don't hold your breath. And remember, I'm the one who told you. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
What you bring a really good point, which is the option B, right? If you put an option B, if you go seek it out, first of all, and then you introduce it, then you have a lot of leverage. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because a lot of people are like, I love where I'm at. I'm comfortable. This employer takes good care of me. Why would I go outside to secure a different offer?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. And it reflects a conversation I had with a doctor just before hopping on this call. So her situation, and it's probably not that different from a lot of the non-doctors on the call. Her situation is she works for an employer that does exactly what you said, Dorothy. It fulfills her cup from a values perspective. She loves her coworkers. She's doing work that's meaningful for her. And so she doesn't want to go anywhere. But she got approached. She got approached by a competitor, and they're offering her a nice little bump in her salary and some additional perks. And so here's the strategy for her that we're going to walk through. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to negotiate the offer from competitor B. So get that offer to the place where it's optimized. Hey, can you increase the salary, the benefits, the schedule, any of the perks? And then what you do is you come back to your current employer and you say, hey, look, I love it here. I don't want to go anywhere. I was approached by your competitor. Again, I don't want to go, but I can't justify leaving that money on the table to my family. So is there anything you can do to close the gap between what competitor B is offered and where I am right now? And they're going to say one of three things. Yes, we can do all of it. No, we can do some of it. Or no, we cannot do any of it. It's as simple as that. For me, it's a math equation, right? Mm-hmm. For people in it, it's a lot more difficult because they're humans. But once you have that optimized offer, now you can come back. That's truly having leverage, Dorothy, is being able to come back to your employer and say, I have a better viable option available to me right now. And that's leverage, right? It's in the academic, you call it BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What's your best alternative? But in very simple terms, it's called leverage. I have an option that's better. I can make that move and I'm going to be in a better position. That's true leverage.
Fantastic. What about if she doesn't like that company as much as she likes this company? But she knows let's for easy math say it's $100,000 more if she goes there. So what kind of thought process or things you have to check off in your mind to say if this is truly strong leverage or if it's only mediocre leverage because I don't really love option B?
Exactly. That's a fabulous question. Let's say the offers are not quite in their ideal state and it's not enough for you to move your family and make that big of a change. then you want to temper what your approach is, right? I don't ever, and I didn't do this for my own career, and I don't do this for my doctors. I don't ever bluff. So when
Mm-hmm.
a doctor says to me, I had a neurosurgeon who was looking for jobs in Texas, Denver, and I think it's California. He got an offer from Oklahoma. And he said, "Hey, Ethan, can I use this offer as leverage against this other offer here in Denver?" I said, "No." Because now what happens is if you take that second offer that you would not accept, right? Because it's in Oklahoma, it's somewhere you don't want to be, and then you bring it back to your current employer and they say, "Cool, take that offer. We're not interested."
Yeah.
Now, what do you have? Now you have a lesser offer that you didn't like, and you don't have the offer that you initially did, right? That's not leverage unless it puts you in a position that's at least as good as the one that you're competing against.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I always tell my clients, and same thing for myself, I would have never, no disrespect to anybody who lives here, but I would have never looked for a job in Taos, New Mexico, because I didn't want to live in Taos, New Mexico. So getting an offer there and then bringing it back, it's like, and my employer tells me to walk. Now I got to live in Taos, New Mexico. Again, no disrespect, but just
Yeah.
not my personal preference. And so if you are going to have that conversation, you want to have a solid offer that you would accept to compete. And you want to make sure that offer is going to put you in at least as good a position as you were, ideally a better one.
Yeah. That is so well articulated, I think, because you have to be able to execute that second offer. Like New Mexico has to be at least in the realm of possibility for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you go about developing or understanding those things? Like money is easy, right? Like you can say, oh, $100,000 more. What is the preparation look like to say these are the things that are going to mean something to tip the scale one way or another?
I think it's really easy to, and this actually, I'll speak for myself. When I started my firm, I assumed that money was the primary motivator for employees because it was my primary motivator. I wanted the highest salary and I was willing to move around the country in order to achieve that as quick as possible. And I've learned through this experience that's not the reality. So the first thing that we do, and I would encourage anybody listening to do this exercise for yourself, is we sit down and we talk about first, where do you want to be geographically? Are you happy where you are? Do you want to? So for me, I moved after law school, I moved after undergrad. But when I finished law school, I knew I wanted to be in Denver. And so I've been here for 11 years now. So I looked for jobs in and around this region. If I would have found a job in Las Vegas, like that would not have been a viable option for me. So first, find the geographic region. Then figure out what are the type of roles that you're primarily interested in. For doctors, that typically means differentiating between private practice, hospital setting, academic, medical center. For employees, that could be very different things. I work for a startup, a Fortune 500, a mom and pop shop. And so, and typically I had 2 to 3 non-negotiables. Compensation, of course, was my big one. But my second one was my boss. I didn't want to work for a boss who wouldn't support my learning development and growth. And so I think that's one of those things that often gets overlooked is making sure that you understand who is the person that I'm going to be supporting. Because in theory, the way I viewed my work is like, my job is to make you look good. And so if you have someone that perhaps you can't trust in that position, you could be potentially doing more harm than good. So figuring out what your non-negotiables are, I think is the third one. And then after that, like it's not a science, right? You're gonna find a job that potentially find a company potentially, but it doesn't have to be your forever place. I often say like doctors will change jobs every 3 to 5 years, especially coming out of training. Same thing probably goes for us as well as like non-doctor W-2 employees. Sometimes it's good to do a quick price check. Am I getting paid what I should be for my skills, geographic region in the country, and responsibilities? And if not, you might need to look around town and see who else might value your skill set and contribution more.
Yeah. This reminds me a few years ago, I was in St. Louis and I was helping a colleague of mine to negotiate their salary. And they just wanted to get like a 10% bump. and couldn't get it. And so we did the strategy that you were alluding to earlier, was getting a option B, like a company B in the mix. And so he had to go to that company, got a $30,000 raise, and didn't love it there. Came back, got another $30,000 raise, and within a year was $60,000 better off
Now
than how he was doing.
$60,000 up. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So to your point, like checking the market is a really smart idea.
So let me ask you a question, Dorothy, on that point, because this is something that I've been a little bit perplexed by. I know that it's easy for me to assume that everyone's like me, you're going to bleed for money, and that's just not reality. But why do you think so? Thinking about your client that you talked about who left for 30 and then came back for another 30, why do you think more people don't make that initial jump for the 30? Like, why would I, knowing that there's another company down the street that would pay me what I believe I'm worth, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they make that change? Why
Yeah.
do someone like you or me to be like, hey, like you need to think
Yeah.
about it?
I think comfort is a big role. A big has we don't know how to yet put a price on comfort, but you're comfortable in the environment that you're in. That you don't have a risk. You know
Yeah.
what you get. It's like lesser of the two evils. But we've also been socially conditioned to say the grass is not greener on the other side. And
Mm.
we take that maybe too much to heart and say, I'm going to find something else wrong in the other company, so I might as well stay here. And then today I was talking to a potential client, and she was saying that I was extremely loyal to my company. So loyalty, as a society, we value it. And so we transfer that into our work relationship. And it's a new thing for us, I think, to say we owe our companies hard work, but not necessarily loyalty.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah. You really hit me in the gut with that third one, because that's the one thing I've never understood. You could open Google right now, and there's going to be news stories of layoffs anywhere in the country now, in the thousands of people. I got laid off. I know a lot of other people who've been laid off. We see mass layoffs. So I can't comprehend where that loyalty comes from when you can toss me out like the trash and just kick me a couple bucks and tell me, yeah, figure it out. I never
Yeah.
understood.
Yeah. It's very sad. Yeah, maybe it's social programming, maybe it's how we were raised. What suggestions do you have to the point? There's so many layoffs right now, and going through your own experience, what advice do you have for people who are going through this hellishness in their life right now?
Wow. I've been there and it's miserable. Wow, wow, wow. I wasn't expecting to think about that. The first thing I would say is talk to someone else who's been through it. If you are going through layoffs or are impacted by it, talk to somebody else who's going through it. If you have been laid off and need to figure out what's next, I think you go through the process we just talked about. Figure out strategically what your next opportunity should be and create a plan to go secure that. Now, the challenge to that's going to be your headspace, because if you're anything like where I was at that time, I was ashamed. I felt, Dorothy, I felt unemployable. Even though I got laid off because my department got closed. I didn't do anything to get laid off. There wasn't any disciplinary action, but it made me feel like, what's wrong with me? Talking to people who have been through it, I think, is encouragement, but then also make sure that you get yourself into the right headspace. Because if it's anything like what I went through, I was definitely a hater on myself. Like, I did not have a ton of confidence. I didn't have any confidence. I didn't feel like I deserved a job. Yeah, ugh, I haven't thought about that in a while.
I'm
Yikes.
sorry. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
but like the cool thing though is like when I was in that time, I talked to somebody else who had been through that, and he told me, he said, there is a good life for you after this company. And I did not believe him. if you would have, I'll just say, I thought I made the most money I'll ever make in my life. That turned out not to be true. I thought I'm never going to have a job again. Like, that's true.
But in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. But I thought so low of myself at that time that if I was listening to this podcast, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate what could come next. And that period was the hardest in my career because I had so much doubt about, I wanted to be a hospital CEO. My whole entire career, going to law school, getting an MBA while I was in law school, working 15 years in hospitals. That was all like for this grand scheme and grand plan to become a hospital CEO. And then when I lost that job, it's as if the entire like Lego mansion or castle I was building got kicked and I just started from zero. So the mindset piece cannot be overstated how important it is to get yourself in the right mind space before you come back. If you can afford that, if you can afford the time to in the therapy or whatever it is that helps you. But man, that was a tough time, Dorothy. That was a super tough time.
I'm really sorry you went through that. I don't have any words. It's like they say, it's like the worst other than losing a spouse, right? That happens to you as far as
it was my biggest fear. Like I was always afraid of losing my job. Even from like when I first, and maybe to your point about social programming and conditioning, maybe there's this intentional environment of like fear that we as employees live in. Like we need that employer, right? Because I got to pay my rent and I got to pay my lights. And I think maybe there's a part of me it was my biggest fear. And once that happened, once I got laid off, I was like, oh, I guess that's the worst they can do to me. So I might as well go off and do my own thing. Like it can't be any worse than that.
Yeah.
I've been really fortunate. It's been a lot better than that. But just to be super clear, I say this to my wife all the time. I would have never started RMPA if I didn't lose my job. I would still be suckling at that little water bottle in the corner of the hamster cage, just trying to get that paycheck every 2 weeks, trying to somehow save enough money to become wealthy. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I was so invested in the journey to become a hospital CEO that I would have never dreamed of going off on my own if the company wouldn't have made that decision for me.
Yeah. So would you say that in total, you're already a CEO now, right? Versus waiting another 20 years, 30 years to be a hospital CEO. So your path got accelerated. You're living a dream that you weren't maybe able to even dare dream. And you're helping a lot of people. So in all, where does the balance go, do you think?
It's a hard thing to articulate because it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. I feel like I'm doing what I was meant to do, but I wouldn't be doing it if the company didn't lay me off first. And so I'm really fortunate, I think, and grateful that I went through that experience. I could not have said that 3 years ago, 2 years ago. When I got laid off, I was, and this is going to be a theme, but I sat down with another person who had been laid off just before me. And he said from another company, we weren't in the same company. And he said to me, getting laid off was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I came home and I told Liz, she was my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, I want that to be my story so badly. But all I had was anger, shame, fear. I didn't have that feeling that he had. This was so good, such a good thing. Now I have it. Now I can say that. But to anybody who's listening, who's been through it, who's going through it, you have to just go through it and feel all of it. You can't speed it up. You can't skip it. You can't speed run it. You have to feel all of it. And hopefully you come through that with the confidence knowing that it wasn't you and that you're better than that decision the company had to make, despite whatever you do next, you don't have to start your own company next. But for me, I now feel like I'm living the most authentic version of myself. And it's hard to conceptualize that without that negative experience of losing my job. Like they have to go together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I listened to Rob Dial, his mindset mentor. He was talking about how success and failure are two sides of a coin. It's like you can't have one without the other. You
Oh,
almost, like you said, you have to go through
oof.
all of it.
That hits so hard, especially for someone who is like so focused on like doing everything the right way,
Mm-hmm.
trying to avoid the discomfort, trying to avoid the failure. And I have failed 15 times since breakfast today, right? Like it is now a natural part of every day. So I'm so happy you said that because I don't think that I appreciate. I thought they were completely distinct ideas. Either you're successful or
Or you
you.
fail. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reality of it is if you're going to be successful, there's going to be a bunch of failures on the way there.
On the way there, absolutely. And I have to remind myself of this all the time because I think, like you, anybody who's the high achiever mindset, it's very hard for us to accept that we can be anything but successful. And the opposite is true.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you had a time machine, Ethan, and you went back to the time when you were really down and you didn't see the light, what one or two things would you tell yourself to get out of that and be ready to be the confident person you are today, who's negotiating for other people and is lit up from within?
Can I show you what I did?
Yes.
Okay, so I was not planning, I did not even think about this, but it's in the photo, so I'll show you.
Yeah.
So when I'm not negotiating contracts, I'm a photographer. And I love like wandering around a city or going to the mountains and taking pictures. And during that time of being in that valley, I was thinking about all of the encouragement I got from people to figure out what comes next, pick yourself up. And every time I would get off the phone with someone, I would feel like I could like bench press the earth. I would feel just so incredibly strong and confident. And I wanted to find a way to memorialize that so I didn't forget it and then also remember it for the next time. So this is what I did. I made this book. It's called Stuck to Remember When You
Oh.
Lose Your Job. And it's a book of my photographs. And it also includes like some encouragement, but it's specifically encouragement that I got from friends. The one I got from my wife, allow yourself to feel exactly what you feel. These were things that I heard that helped me remember that this is just an experience that I'm going to go through and grow from. And I don't think I would have had the courage to one start my own thing if it wasn't for all of those conversations. So I know it's just one thing, but I think it's a really important thing, Dorothy, is talk to people, tell people what you're going through. I think the instinct for me, at least, was to curl up into the fetal position and not tell anybody and then just hope things magically got better. But so I had a gap job for about 11 months between starting RMPA and losing my previous job. And I got that from a relationship with someone that I had shared my story with. And what I specifically did was I put out a post on LinkedIn and I said, hey, everybody, I've moved on from this opportunity. I'm super grateful for all the things I've learned. Here's the opportunities I'm looking for next in this geographic region. So if anybody knows, let me know. What that did was two things. It let people know that I was open for opportunities. I was open to work, but it also destigmatized that feeling of shame that I had been let go because other people chimed in and said, oh man, dude, that happened to me a few years ago. It sucks. You're gonna be better for it. And so that book represents so much encouragement from that time. So the one big thing I would say to anybody who's going through that experience or will go through is talk to people about it. I think your instinct is going to be to keep it to yourself, but please talk to people about it. Talk to me about it. Call me and I'll talk to you about it.
Yeah.
But people about it, because I think that will help you appreciate that it's not just you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I love it. Thank you so much. So now going back to negotiation. So if you are laid off, our first instinct is of course to go find the next job right away so you can stop feeling the all the icky feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of tends to put you, in my experience, a little bit of a desperate mode, right? Like I want a job badly, like yesterday. So how would you advise such a person to get the right mindset so you can still negotiate for the compensation that you deserve, not
Yep.
settle?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I'm going to separate this into two. The mental health piece, I think, is really important. And for people who can and are interested in it, that should invest in that. And I think that is an important component to the second part, which I think is the strategy that you prepare. So the reason I say it that way is because if you have the best strategy, but don't feel like you deserve a job, it's gonna come across right in your
Mm-hmm.
interviews and your conversations. And so I think that both parts are necessary, and neither in and of themselves is sufficient. So if you can be super confident, but if you don't have a plan, you're just going to go out there and submit applications that go out into the ether. So what I think is the most effective plan for me coming out of that was I took a break. I took a 1 week break and didn't do anything related to a job. And that was intentional. I didn't want that knee jerk reflex, because when I did look for a job, my feeling was I'm going to get a better job than they laid me off from and stick it to them,
Oh, yeah.
not knowing that, like, how does that hurt them if I get a better job? So I took a week off and I hung out with my dogs, took a bunch of pictures, had pity parties a bunch. That was fun. And then that next week I had a plan. What that plan was is I'm going to identify the industries, job titles, and salary levels that I'm interested in. And that's going to lead me to some of the companies that fall within that, the jobs that are available, et cetera. And then what I did is I created a spreadsheet, and I created a list of every job that I applied for. And every time I applied for a job, I went onto LinkedIn and I found the highest ranking person I could in that organization and sent them a note and said, "Hey, I just noticed that you were hiring for this position. Just so you know, I'm the guy because I've done this and this in my career. I would love to be considered. I submitted my application. I'd love to be considered." And then now what you've done is you've put your name on someone's radar who could make a decision, or at least get your name to somebody who could make a decision. In addition to applying, I would then send a LinkedIn message telling them how I'm the exact solution to the problem they're trying to solve by hiring that position. And then I keep a tracker of the status. So eventually, if your experience was anything like mine, you're going to have week 1 of unemployment, week 2, week 3, week 4. It's going to be a lot of jobs. So you want to be able to come back and say, green means I've heard back from them and it's positive. Yellow means I have not heard back. I need to follow up. Red means I got to follow up and it's a negative follow up, meaning there's no more steps to consider. So having a plan, a strategy, and a system for me was invaluable. The other thing I did, which I had never done before in my career, is I scheduled coffee meetings every week, at least 3. And that was with people who I respect, admire, or just want to get to know better. And inevitably in that conversation, at the end of the conversation, I would say some version of, just so you know, I'm looking for my next opportunity. Do you know anybody in X, Y, or Z, right? These fields, industries, or organizations. Relationships were invaluable. The way I got my job was a recruiter from a company had seen my post about being laid off. They sent it to a colleague. That colleague reached out to me, said, "Hey, we have an opportunity that might fit." And then we started the application and interview process. So there's no harm that will come from getting the word out there, other than maybe like your ego might take a hit the first time, which that sucks, but that's nothing compared to not having positive momentum towards finding another job. And relationships are going to be the key to that. The Excel part of that, the reason I emphasize that is for organization.
Yeah.
You're going to submit so many applications, right? You don't want to forget, oh, I reached out to Amazon, but who did I contact? You want to know exactly who you reached out to, when, and when your next follow-up is scheduled for them, so you don't fall off into the ether. And for me, I treated finding a job as my job. So I'd wake up, go to a coffee shop, and then plan to be there from 9 to 1 and get X number of applications done, X number of outreaches to people done. But I treated looking for a job as my job because I had the time.
Yeah, love it. And then you don't have time to, like you said, curl up into a fetal position, right? Because you're acting and you're doing and you're getting momentum by getting those coffee calls scheduled.
One thing I will say that I hope also is appreciated, that I don't think I appreciated before I heard it. A friend of mine who I just absolutely adore, who passed away since then, said to me, well, this was during that time, she said, your job title is not going to be on your tombstone. So you'll find a job, you're going to be okay. Take this time right now and invest in yourself. And for me, what that meant was, go take pictures in the afternoon. Go spend 3 hours walking around Denver taking pictures. And don't worry about, did you get a call back from the 82nd application you sent out today? Do your required work from the time that you've established, be disciplined, and then also appreciate this time for what it is. Because your job is not your entire life. It's just one component of your life.
Yeah, that is a great advice. Absolutely. And it's actually, I didn't plan this, but we do have an informational meeting, how to conduct those pre-meetings and post-after application meetings coming up next Monday. So if anyone is listening to this and, if you hear it from us, please come on LinkedIn.
Do it.
Yeah. All right, Ethan, how can people find you? And what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, best ways to find us. LinkedIn is a big one. My first name and last name, Ethan Nkana. We're on Instagram as well as Physician Agency. And we have a YouTube page, again, under my name. One of the cool things I was just thinking about this week that I'm going to work on is building a YouTube page for our brand so that we can have more branded content. But right now, Instagram, LinkedIn, and our website, www.rmpa.robertmarypauladam.co.
All right. And of course, we'll put all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Ethan. Really appreciate your insights and sharing, being so vulnerable on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Joe. This is great.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. There you have it, my friends. Insights from a leading negotiator who's using the latest and greatest techniques in influence and persuasion to help physicians earn the money that they deserve. There are some universal nuggets that can apply to each and every one of us. The discussion about having a plan B, Ethan's views on loyalty and employer-employee dynamics, impacts of layoffs and career shifts, and how to leverage job offers to maximize your compensation. I hope you took away some action tips that you can apply to your unique situation. Thank you for listening, and bye for now. There you have it, my friends. As you know, I'm on a mission to close the pay gap. Every podcast episode is designed to give you the tools, techniques, and inspiration so you can bravely advocate for yourself. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.